Hey guys, in this video we'll be discussing the safety elements of supercritical fluid extraction. The first question is, why do we care? And the reason we should care is because supercritical fluids are literally everywhere. They're at plants, they're in research centers, and they're at universities. And the reason they're so ubiquitous is because supercritical fluids are unparalleled when it comes to extracting high volumes of very high quality product from a feedstock. That being said, there are downsides to using these fluids, and the main one is the additional safety elements that are required when actually using one of these fluids for extraction. We can see an example of this, even at small scales. In this video, a science teacher is conducting a demo of supercritical fluids in his classroom. So let's play it and see what happens. As you can see, it's a pretty big explosion, and I don't know if you noticed, but that dark spot right there is a hole in the ceiling that was produced from this explosion. So you can just imagine what would have happened to the teacher if he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The reason supercritical fluids are so dangerous is because their properties are between those of liquids and gases. You're probably sick of seeing phase diagrams in all these presentations, but it's important to drive in that these fluids are generated at very high pressures and very high temperatures, which means that they have liquid-like densities and gas-like compressibilities that give them a very high penetrating power. Essentially, they behave like fluids at very high pressures. And for those of y'all who aren't familiar with water jets, etc., being used to cut through different materials, here's a video. Here they're using a high pressure fluid to cut through a bowling ball, and it cuts straight through with very, very low amounts of resistance. It has very high penetrating power, and as we can see, it cuts straight through that bowling ball. So again, very dangerous. And this image shows what can happen even at the plant level. Just a huge amount of devastation from improper usage and improper safety measures being implemented. So let's talk about those safety measures. What are the causes of equipment failure? The first two are directly related to the equipment. It can be caused by a failure in process control or the failure of a valve. The other case is just general damage to infrastructure and fatigue that's generated over time. So it's important to make sure that you're incorporating the proper process control, that your valves and your infrastructure aren't out of date, and that all this infrastructure is constantly being checked to make sure that it is workable and will actually kick in whenever we're dealing with supercritical fluids. The last three elements are relevant both to the actual equipment as well as the fluid itself. Excessive elastic and plastic deformation, high temperature fractures, and corrosion are all caused by the fluid being at high temperatures, high pressures, and having certain chemical properties. So be sure to make sure that your equipment is equipped to deal with these high temperatures and pressures and can bear the chemical properties of whatever fluid it is that you're using. In terms of mitigating these failures, we've already kind of addressed this, but make sure that equipment meets the proper specifications, that it shows only reasonable amounts of wear, and you're constantly monitoring it to make sure that it is still in its proper safety, specifications. And be aware of chemical dangers. Make sure that your fluid isn't going to wear away and eat through whatever vessel that you're using. Another way to mitigate equipment failure is through proper process control measures. The prime examples being pressure relief valves and rupture discs. The top GIF kind of shows you pressure relief valves. As you can see in the image, the pressure relief valve kicks in whenever you exceed a certain pressure. It bleeds off the excess, and once the process falls back within certain specifications, it closes. So in this case, it both opens and closes. It restores its closed position whenever it's not needed. Rupture discs behave a little bit differently, and in effect, they're kind of a last effort device in order to make sure that the entire vessel doesn't explode. What happens is instead of the vessel itself exploding, the disc breaks, and the excess pressure is bled off. The disc does in fact break, which means unlike the pressure relief valve, it can't be closed again once it kicks in, once it's actually used. So let's see an example of what happens. In this particular case, we see an explosion, and something important to note is there's still some excess pressure being bled off, even after the initial burst. And that's because the pressure relief valve doesn't actually close afterwards. It is actually broken and will need to be replaced afterwards. However, in the worst case scenario, when an explosion does in fact occur, it's important to make sure that the proper personal equipment is being used. So, when an explosion does occur, you'll see overpressure thermal radiation and kinetic energy from the exploded fragments. Each of these can cause different kinds of damage. The main one being eardrum fractures, but also death from lung injury, body impacts, and burns. Each of these has a different level of severity and probability. When it comes to probability, eardrum fractures and burns tend to be the most likely. When it comes to severity, death from lung injury is a big one. Body impact is another, and then burns can also be very, very dangerous and can, in fact, be fatal to nearby personnel. In order to reduce the likelihood of any one of these things occurring to nearby personnel, it's important to first wear hearing protection. As we saw before, hearing is one of the main things that can be damaged from exploded eardrums when an explosion does occur. So definitely make sure to wear the proper hearing protection when working nearby a supercritical fluid extraction facility. The second, coveralls, are a no-brainer. They protect your skin against burns. Finally, helmets. Those ensure that when the explosion does occur, that it doesn't hit the most sensitive parts of your body, the most sensitive and the most critical parts of your body. So they're very important for shielding your head from any high velocity large fragments that can be generated from an explosion. In conclusion, supercritical fluids can be very dangerous. They're useful but can be dangerous if proper attention isn't being paid to safety measures. When it comes to attention, just make sure to take into account the dangers of supercritical fluids in design and make sure that these design elements are incorporated in your process and that the process is indeed always under control. Finally, make sure to wear the proper protections on your body: hearing protection, coveralls, and helmets, and other equipment to make sure that if an explosion does indeed occur, that you yourself are shielded and you don't come under any danger. With that, that wraps it up. Thank you so much, guys, and we'll catch you with the next video.